Okay, recording has started.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our March monthly data reporting training. We do have a lot of information for you this morning, so we're not going to delay the time. If we get done early, we'll give you that time back, but nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. Today we're going to just give you a little bit of updates of what's going on here. We're going to talk about indicators 4A and B. We're going to talk about indicators 9 and 10, and of course, the BEAST significant disproportionality. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. All right, so the year-to-year change, those responses are due tomorrow, Friday, March 22nd, if you have not submitted them. And once again, there's no right or wrong answer, just an explanation of what led to the change within your data. I did want to let you know that speech language, because speech language is and can be a primary disability in South Carolina. For in Section D, the teachers are added back into Section A with the teachers, and then for the related services, you'll see them in Section C. So you will not see the numbers reported identically for speech language the way that you see the related services provider. So I did want to make that clarification. The systemic verification checks should be in your ADT folder by tomorrow. If they're not there already, no need to send us any email. If you decide to check right now and you do not see them, we'll have them in ADT by tomorrow. Um, there is no need to return or resubmit the data to OSIS. All corrections should be made by your final submission within the enriched system. Remember, this is our last submission with the frontline system. So all corrections must be made within that system. We have asked them to lift the ban of the critical errors just to kind of help us gauge on what's going on within your system so that if we need to provide additional feedback, we can do those things. If you are still seeing critical errors, please reach out to support, to the Enrich support and let them know so that they can release those restrictions from your submissions. The Sons ID project, we are closer. The PowerSchool team, they have updated the guidance and it is currently being reviewed by that team's director just for final clarification should there be any. We've identified, well, not we, she's identified 6 categories that will need to be addressed when resolving the matches and near matches for students without the son's ID number. So once that information is released, please check and talk with your PowerSchool coordinator or your registrar, whoever in your district handles that responsibility. They will not be able to resolve those matches without your assistance because they are not as familiar with those students as you are. The merge duplicates, once again, the guidance from the state is that this process is still paused. However, there are some districts who've elected to go ahead and add those required data components in PowerSchool so that they could move on. That is more manageable for some of our smaller districts, but our larger districts, depending upon how many you have, may not be doable. But the merge duplicates will not be resolved until the Sun's ID project is resolved. So those two work hand in hand. And so if you just have to have it done now, it is your choice. Although the state's guidance is to pause that process, if you decide to go ahead and fill that information into PowerSchool just to get it flowing, that is your choice. And whatever repercussions, should there be any, will just have to be on the district. So the profiles and determinations, I did want to share, once again, we're still in our correction period phase. Do not share any information about your current status. And that is solely giving you time to review the data, make correct, and allowing us to make those corrections should there be any corrections to make. To date, for the profiles, there was an error in the file that we received for the high schools outcomes for ELA and math. Those corrections were made, and you should see the correction or the corrected results in your ADT file that was placed in ADT a couple of weeks ago. So the results that you see or the results that are displayed in that file in ADT for high school is what will appear on your profiles. Should you have any questions about those, the data or the results, please let us know so that we can work with the appropriate office to get that resolved. As it pertains to the determinations, compliance, there have been corrections to compliance factors 2, 3, 4, and 9, and it's only selected districts that were impacted by that, and those districts have been notified or contacted about those changes. So if you weren't contacted about any of those indicators or I'm sorry, compliance factors, then your data remain the same. For performance factor 8, we had the target of 6.88, and that was changed back to 9 simply because we did not want to move any targets for the performance factors for this current year. We wanted them to remain the same as last year. That change increased 3 districts from 2 points to 3 points, but no one's overall outcome average changed. And those 3 districts were notified as well. Transitions of system. Yes, I have been avoiding this conversation simply because I don't have a whole lot of information for you. I can tell you that right now, as it stands, we are going dark sometime in June. I do not have a specific date. What that means for districts is that you will be required to submit your reports earlier. So any reports that's typically due in July would have to be submitted early. We do not have any specifics as to what that date will look like. We just know it's coming. If you have attended or have not listened in on any of the Enrich Knowledge Group meetings, I strongly advise you to listen to those. They give specific instructions on things that you need to do as a district to close out programs, complete processes and tasks within the system. We want as much data, completed data, to transition to the new system, and anything that is pending or incomplete will not convert over or be transitioned over into the new system. So we want you to talk with your districts about getting those IEPs closed out, reevaluations, initials, getting those things completed sooner rather than later. During that dark period, we do know that there will be some last minute inquiries or things that you may need to do, but we want those numbers to be as small as possible so that we can avoid the rush. We don't know what will happen, but what we have completed within the current system prior to that, the better it should be, and I say should. And that's all that I have for that. I don't have any inside knowledge about storage or systems or anything like that. Anything specific as it pertains to that, you would need to contact Katie Heiss. And if one of my team members could put her information in the chat so that districts can reach out to her directly for any additional information about the transition of systems. Okay, indicator 4. So indicator 4, the purpose of this report, it is an equity requirement report to evaluate the extent in which students are suspended or if there's any disproportionality among suspensions or students being removed for long term. Additional actions are required by those districts who meet the threshold of 2.5 per 2.5. Our data source, this is a lag report, so it is looking at your data from the 22-23 school year, looking at the child count and the Table 5 discipline report. Indicators for A and B, once again, it is looking at rates of suspensions and expulsions. For A, there are no subgroups. It is an overall report, while for B is looking at suspension among the 7 federal race ethnicity categories, which are listed on the slides. For indicator 4A, because it is a results indicator, there is a target that your data should be less than or equal to that target for your profiles. And for the FY23 profile, that result is 3.27. The methodology for indicator 4A, it is a rate ratio where we compare. There are no minimum size for indicator 4A. Your results are what your results are. While we look at the district rate compared to the state rate for students with disabilities. And it is only looking at suspensions or those LEAs that have suspension over 10 days, greater than 10 days, divided by the state's overall number of students with disabilities that have been suspended more than 10 days. The calculation as an example, we're going to look at district LEA2, we can see that they had a total of 31 students that had more than 10 days suspension. In their child count file, they had 2911. So you take the 31 divided by 2911. You can see that in the gray area, that is your discipline, that is the discipline, and the yellow is the child count file. The state total for the number of students that were suspended over 10 days was 416, divided by the state's child count total of 106,314. And so when you divide the two, the outcome is 2.72. That is what triggers the file reviews for this particular indicator. And once again, meeting the trigger is not a bad thing. It is an opportunity to review your files, review your processes to see if there's anything lingering. Should you find any discrepancies or things that are not compliant within that process, that is where the negative thing comes into play. So meeting the trigger within itself is not a bad thing. I think it's actually a good thing. For 4B, it is a compliance indicator. While 4A is a results indicator, the process of meeting the trigger is identical. You still have to go through those processes the same for 4A, the same as you would for 4B. The OSEP actually identifies or determines what our target should be for 4B, which is 0%. Similar to the methodology for 4A, with the caveat of 4B, we do get a minimum N size in the district file while we're comparing to the state file. So for the students with disabilities, they should have a minimum of 10 in that particular race or ethnicity category. And to illustrate an example, you see in the gray where the child count file has 21, while the state total is 416. And looking at your child count of the other race ethnicity categories, you see the 916 that's highlighted. Those particular categories does not meet the minimum N size, so therefore it would be compared to the state. And while you're comparing it to the state, you see that the overall outcome is 4.42, which triggers the file reviews within the LEAs. And that concludes for 4A. Do we have any questions in the chat?
It looks like Betsy from Lexington Richland 5 was asking what are dates for reporting?
So this is a report that is actually completed by us here at the state, and we notify you, and that information should be coming out to you during the month of April. So we complete the analysis here. There is no submission for this part of it. We do have our correction specialist on the call with us this morning, just listening in. So if you do meet the trigger, you will get your next steps or your additional action that is required, or instructions will be coming from our corrections team. We're looping them into the process, but as the into the identification process. And your next step, if you meet the trigger, will come from them. But it's nothing that you guys or the LEAs need to submit to us. We complete the analysis at the beginning and then notify you. And then if you meet the trigger, you'll get additional requirement actions from the corrections team. Okay. Any other questions?
Will indicators and tables be submitted through PCG?
I'm not sure if I understand.
They're asking if the reports would be submitted through the new system once it's in place.
I don't have a lot of information as to how that process will look just yet, so I'm going to defer until we get to that point of reporting in the training to actually know how that process will look from the LEA standpoint, as also how that process will look for us at the state. So we're not at a point where we could actually give any information about that, and I don't want to speculate. Okay.
Those are all the questions in the chat for right now.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So moving on to indicators 9 and 10. 9 and 10, while indicator 4 is looking at discrepancy in suspension, indicators 9 and 10 are looking at disproportionate representation in identification and placement of students with disabilities. The trigger for this for these two indicators are 2.5 as well. Our data source for indicators 9 and 10, we look at the current year data. So we're looking at the 22-23. I think that should be 23-24 child count, as well as the 45th day enrollment. And within the child count, we look at the school age population. So those are students that are in 5K through ages 21. While indicator 9 is looking at disproportionate representation among the 7 federal reporting race ethnicity groups. And indicator 10 looks at disproportionate representation among the federal race, ethnicity, as well as the 6 disability categories of autism, emotional disability, intellectual disability, specific learning disability, other health impairment, and speech language. So those are the 6 key factors that indicator 10 looks at. So it's an add-on to indicator 9. This 9 and 10 are both compliance indicators, so OSEP determines what our target should be, and both 9 and 10 should be 0 or zeros. Okay. How to determine the type of risk. So we basically look at the seven racial ethnicity group. We determine the risk and the data. We determine if the risk and the data are appropriate for analyzing significant disproportionality. And so we look at the first question is, are both the minimum N size and cell size met? So our cell size for 9 and 10 is 10, while the N size is 30. And so if both N size and cell size are less than 30, that stops the analysis. There's nothing that we can do because the sample sizes are too small. If the answer is yes, then we ask, are both the minimum cell and N size met for the denominator? And if the answer is no, then an alternate risk ratio is calculated. And basically what that means is that we use the state totals instead of using the LEA totals. If the answer is yes, then we calculate the risk ratio. So if the cell and N sizes are too small within the LEA, then we calculate an alternate risk ratio, while the other is just a risk ratio. And I added a notation in here to say that the cell size references the numerator while the N size references the denominator. So within each of your groups of data population, we're looking at the risk of students in the race ethnicity for identification divided by the risk of all other students in for identification. So you can see on the slide, it gives the numerator and the denominator for both the enrollment file as well as your child count file. Okay. In this example, we're going to look at we'll assume that all numbers are based on the students whose race ethnicity is Hispanic or Latino. For indicator 9, so we have in A1, which is representing the LEA child count, school age population. A2 will represent the LEA for all other race ethnicities in the child count, while B1 references the LEA's enrollment of Hispanic Latino for grades K through 12, and B2 will represent the total of all other race ethnicities. So just to put a visual to what I just say, you have your AB that's divided by A1 representing your child count file as well as your enrollment file. And that comes out to a 1.98%. So it does not meet the trigger. No additional actions or requirement will be needed. That completes the analysis. While if we are taking that same information and looking at an alternate risk ratio, and these are the numbers that we're going to look at. So C1, we have 52 students with autism, and it is compared to 7 LEA child count of all other students, race ethnicity that are not autism for the 7 race ethnicity groups. And then we have the state child count file for all other students, all other disabilities that are not autism. I know this sounds very confusing. It is. And so the state total we're looking at from the LEA file, we're still looking at the 4,300 students that are Hispanic, as well as the LEA overall count. But then we also get a state enrollment count into this equation as well. So to put that into an example, we get C1 divided by B1, looking at the state file, and then C2 divided by B2. Looking at the cell size, it's less than 10, so we have to compare it to the state. The minimum cell size is not met, so we'll have to calculate this using an alternate risk ratio. and calculating using an alternate risk ratio, because it is now compared to the state's file, that LEA would then have a 2.51, and that does meet the trigger. So they will have to do the file reviews and have additional conversations with the corrections team. And basically what that means is that a student in this particular district is 2.5% more likely to get identified. A Hispanic student is 2.5% more times likely to get identified as a student with autism than any other race, ethnicity, or disability categories within that district. Okay. All right, before we move on to significant disproportionality, do we have any questions in the chat?
There are no questions in the chat at this time.
Thank you. I know it's a mouthful, it's a lot to absorb. But if you have any additional questions, or if you don't feel comfortable asking on the call, just reach out, give us a call. It is a beast of a presentation, so we welcome any questions that you may have. So for significant disproportionality, this report also is conducted by the OSIS data team, and we send the results of the analysis to the LEAs, or to the districts. Once the analyses are completed, where we're talking significant disproportionality, we're looking at discipline, identification, and placement. Okay. So the data sets, once again, for identification, we look at the child count and the enrollment file for 3 years. And so the data that you will receive for the 23-24 school year, which is the equivalent to the federal fiscal year of 22-23, we will look at the 2020, 2021, and 2022 data for significant disproportionality. This is slightly different from indicators 9 and 10, because 9 and 10 looks at the current year data. So we're looking at the 23-24 data for indicators 9 and 10. For placement, the caveat to the placement is that we only look at the school age population, which is 5K through 21, while identification and placement looks at all students ages 3 through 21. The data sources for significant disproportionality for the child count is used in all 3 areas: identification, placement, and discipline, while identification only includes the 45th day enrollment report. We get that from the Office of Research and Data Analysis, and that total comes from PowerSchool. For discipline, we look at all disciplinary removals, and that is your Table 5 report that you would previously submit to our office. Just a reminder that for Table 5 this year, you will not need to submit anything to us. We will be conducting that analysis here at the state level, but we will provide you with a copy of that report for your records. Okay. The child count for significant disproportionality, it is related to the placement. So we're basically looking at the LRE codes for these children. Let me make sure I got that right. Yeah. The child count for significant disproportionality is related to placement in educational environment. The child count refers to an unduplicated count of children with disabilities who are receiving services, who are 5K through 21. So basically what we're saying is that those are the 2 data sources. We're just giving a more thorough, in-depth explanations of what the data is and why we're using those particular data sets to complete these analyses. Okay. For significant disproportionality, there's a total of 144 different tables that we use. So if you have any questions about those tables and how those data are calculated, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Unlike the threshold of 2.5 for indicators 4, 9, and 10, it's not necessarily a bad thing to meet those triggers. However, for significant disproportionality, the only exclusion for identification and placement is if you have reasonable progress. And so reasonable progress is that your data decreases by 0.1% for each reporting year. For discipline, there is no reasonable progress. Once you meet that threshold of 3.03%, you have significant disproportionality. Identification and placement, that threshold is larger. We use 4% for that, simply because it takes a little longer for students to transition through the years for identification and placement. And we added a checklist in here so that, you know, if you wanted to go back and pull your data and try, we welcome you. We're not perfect. So if you wanted to go back and try to run these analysis for yourself and just compare to what we have, we're providing you with that information to be able to do that. Okay. We wanted to include the our correction specialist. So if there are corrections of non-compliance that needs to be made, we wanted to give you a direct point of contact once you're identified. If you know already that you're going to meet those thresholds, if you want to get an early start. For indicators 4A, 4B, and indicator 12, Stacy Rowland is our contact. For indicators 9, 10, and 11, we have Talani Edwards. And the team lead for both Talani and Stacy are Elizabeth Moore. And we wanted to include their contact information should there be any questions, or if you have pending questions about anything as it pertains to corrections of noncompliance for these indicators. We wanted to provide you with a direct point of contact. Okay. Ooh. Just some additional reminders. For the month of April, we know that spring break is going on, so there will be no monthly meeting during the month of April. We will resume in May with our monthly meetings. There will also be no systemic verification check in the month of April. We know that districts are training and we have spring break and all kinds of things going on during the month of April, as well as testing. And so just to give you some time to focus on getting those things completed sooner rather than later. And at this time, do we have any questions?
Would you like me to open up the floor for
Sure.
questions?
Yes.
Okay, one
Yes.
moment. Okay, participants can unmute themselves and ask any questions if they would like now. Okay, we have additional questions in the chat.
Okay. I know that indicators 4, 9, and 10, as well as significant disproportionality, are BEAST reports. Like I said, we should have those analyses for indicators 4, 9, and 10 and significant disproportionality to you probably within the next 2 weeks. That information, your results will be uploaded into ADT. And then if you meet those thresholds or those triggers, the corrections team will be following up with you for additional requirements or reviews.
Hi, Carolyn. This is Melissa with Georgetown.
Hey, Melissa.
My question is about the SUNS ID and those students that are leaving high school and enrolling in an adult ed program. Can you tell me the process for that? They've already been in power school, so they're now going to the adult ed program.
Right. So with the students that are withdrawn and going to adult ed, the process will look like this. Because the School of Enrollment is needed for the graduation dropout rate, we have to see that in there. So those students are withdrawn from your power school system and re-enrolled with the code of EEI. They cannot, as a matter of fact, they're going to add a validation rule into the system because of the requirement for the graduation and dropout rate districts cannot just go in and change them from E to an EEI. We need to see that withdrawal code of them withdrawing to adult ed and then re-enrolling them with the code of EEI, which will exclude them from reportings from that point on.
And would I add them under SSI or keep them identified?
They
as-
will stay, they will remain in the school of enrollment.
Okay, so they're homeschool.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that will be addressed in the guidance coming through. Any additional questions?
One question did come into the chat from Laura Pace. So adult ed students stay at their high school, not move to SSI school.
That is correct.
Next question was, what if adult ed student is coming from another district?
If the adult ed student is coming to your district from another district, you will add them into the SSI school. It is important that they remain attached to the previous school because that is the school that will impact the graduation and dropout rate. So if they transfer to you from another district to go to adult ed, you will add them into the SSI school.
Okay. Someone's asking you to repeat what you said about homeschool kids and the SSI schools.
Didn't say anything about them, but is there a question in particular that they had about the SSI and the?
I'm not sure. Laura Simmons,
Laura,
you can unmute
you
yourself.
want to come off mute?
Yeah. Hey, Carolyn.
Hey.
I thought, so do our homeschool kids go to the SSI schools or they stay in their home school?
So if you know, and we've had a couple of conversations about this, and this is where we have landed. If you know the zone in which that student or the school in which that student would ordinarily attend, go ahead and add them into that school.
Okay, so we
And
wouldn't know
just
that.
code them and just add them with an EEI code. If you are unaware of where that child what school that child would be attached to, then you add them into the SSI school.
Okay, so only put them in there if we don't know their homeschool, but we would know their homeschool. Okay. Thanks.
Sure, you're welcome. Okay. Okay, well, if there are no additional questions,
Carolyn, there is one more in the chat about private school students go into SSI schools, right?
it's going to follow the same logic. They're all going to follow the same logic. If you are aware of the zone school, add them into that zone school as with an EEI code. So the theory is you only want to put them in that SSI school if you're uncertain, or if in the case of adult ed, if they're coming to you from another district. But if you know what school they're going to be attached to, just go ahead and add them to that school with an EEI code.
Carolyn, it's
Hey,
Melissa.
Carolyn. Oh,
Oops.
hey, I just have one more question.
Mhm.
I don't know if we've heard anything more, but our duplicate students, the ones that were manually entered, are we able to merge those and enrich it?
So the guidance from our team right now is it's still paused. Some districts have elected to go ahead and add that information into PowerSchool just to kind of get rid of it. But once the SUNS ID project and the merge duplicate actually works hand in hand. So once we're done with the SUNS ID project and send that file over to Enrich, that will resolve the merge duplicate records. But if you can't wait, you can go ahead and add, make sure that all of that basic enrollment information is added into PowerSchool so it'll flow over correctly, and that'll eliminate that.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
Carolyn, this is Melissa. So with my adult ed kids that were previously manually entered prior to the SSI project, what do I need to do for them? Because they're still showing as manually entered, and I haven't entered them in Power School or anything. So do I need to go back and have the Power School clerk?
Just
With
pause on those students for right now. I don't know that. Send me that question. Let me let the Power School person add that question into the Q&A. We want to make sure that it's addressed. So send me that question, and we want to make sure that it's added into the Q&A.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
There were a couple more questions in the chat. Let's see. For a private school student, they could live outside our district. Do they go into the SSI school?
If you're uncertain if they live outside of your district, I don't know why they would be in your district if they live outside of your district, but if you are unaware of what school that student would attend within your district, then you would add them into the 991 school.
Okay, and then let's see. It says, so for child find students, we use the same guidance of entering them into their home school if we know it instead of SSI school.
Correct. Correct.
There is one from Kelly Sellers, and if anyone wants to come off of mute and just ask directly, you can do so. But Kelly Sellers is asking, am I understanding correctly? If a student is being homeschooled with Grace Homeschool Association, for example, that student has transferred out of district. We should still have them enrolled with an EEI code.
Correct.
If we have not addressed your question in the chat, please come off of mute and ask.
So who should be in the SSI school, I guess, if all these examples are not?
Well, so the thing is, originally, when we had conversations, the SSI school was going to be the catch-all. But for flow of processes, you know, we were only talking about things from the enrich side. But once we got to talking and partnering with the Power School folks, for flow of what we're trying to accomplish, it was just easier. So work closely with your Power School coordinator. They're going to get the official guidance first. So reach out to them. By the time I send it to you guys, they would have already had it. Reach out to them, talk through the scenarios with them. We do not know all of the unique instances. So if you have questions about it, send it to us. We want to definitely get those questions into the Q&A. The thing about the SSI school or students being coded as EEI, it does not impact anything. It doesn't impact anything on the Power School side, and we just need to make sure that we are not impacting reporting on the Power School side. I do not know when the written guidance is coming out. It is currently being reviewed by the Power School directors, the team leads on that side. I have seen them. I did not see anything that stood out from a process side for what we do, but I don't know all the ins and outs of the Power School side. So they have to put their eyes on it to make sure that both worlds can unite and form a perfect marriage. It is new information to everyone. I'm giving the best answer I possibly can without treading or getting called into the principal's office again. That's not a pretty good feeling. So once again, the only thing that I can really safely encourage you to do is just partner, talk through the processes, all of those unique situations that you may have, talk with your Power School person to streamline the processes. Students don't have to be exited from the SSI school. They can just stay there. It doesn't impact anything. Should walk in speech therefore. I think you guys are really just kind of overthinking the process. Once again, if you know the school of enrollment or the zone school that that student would ordinarily attend, you add them into Power School into that particular school. Otherwise, if it's unknown, then you put them in the SSI school. Okay. I think that's all the questions that I see. Okay. If there are no additional questions, that concludes our meeting for today. But should you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. If I don't know the answer, I will connect you with who knows the answer. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your day.